Okay, welcome to this hangout here. This is Nolan with PostProduction.com, and we have Brian San Marco here with us. And you may have seen the review that we did with the RX4 Izotope. Awesome job. It was great hanging out with him. And if you haven't heard of Brian San Marco, he's post-production, musician, sound extraordinaire. He's worked on some amazing projects. Did the restoration of Steamboat Willie with Disney. He's worked with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In other conversations, he said he worked on the first sound movie, the first movie with sound. I guess that's what it was, Brian. With
yeah, it was the first movie with sound in the Canadian archives. To be fair, it may not have been, because that stuff you never know what the first is actually. Some people will claim one thing, but this was from like 1921 or earlier than that. It was like 1917 or 18. It was really, I mean, it was honestly the film itself was falling apart, which is probably part of what I had to restore. So that was a long time ago. I wish I had these tools now that I had then that I have now.
Yeah. Nice. So cool. So Brian's going to show us a little bit about how that works. But before we do that, let me just tell you again who PostProduction.com is. We're a resource and a directory for everything that has to do with post-production. And if you have not gotten your free listing yet on the site, do it. And I'm going to show you real quick how you can do that, or where you can do that. It's really simple. The name of the industry, PostProduction.com. Just go to the site, and you can see this is the directory here of people who can get listings. So you can easily get found by people who are in the post-production, looking for post-production. And to get your free listing, just go up here where it says free listing, and click there. It takes about maybe 2 minutes to get your listing. So that's the shameless plug, and now we'll get into what everybody's waiting for here. Brian, why don't you take us into a little bit of RX4 and show us, maybe start off with the beginner, show us some things that are like the 20% of the things that matter most to them, and then maybe come back around and show us some tips for the experts or the pro users.
Okay, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me again, Nolan. I've been using RX for a very long time. Been doing spectral repair for even longer. So what I'm going to get into now is a little bit of sort of the specifics, how I remove certain things. So let's get you on my RX screen here. How's that looking? Can you see that all right?
Not yet, but oh, there we go.
I'm not even seeing it all right. There we go. Okay, so in this section I have just a sample of audio.
I'm just an overworked doctor sweating my guts out day and night in this under-equipped dump.
You hear some nice nasty noises, and towards the end there a nice big pop. I'm going to actually remove this marker here.
This under-equipped dump?
See it there. So basically, it's fairly simple to start from the get-go and remove pops. So I have here. Let's take this big pop I'm seeing here. First of all, for people who have not used Izotope before or are new to it, I want to take you to a screen that's really important to me, I found, which is under this View menu in Spectrogram Settings. And it's going to allow you, sorry, I got to move it over here. It's going to allow you to change the color. By default, we're stuck with cyan to orange, which is not very easy to look at or very easy to see things, as you can see. So I immediately change it to a multicolor 2, which for me is the best. And I change the frequency scale to logarithmic so I can see more of the low end. I recommend you do that. It'll just make it easier to see. It's easier on the eyes. It's up to you. But now I can see things better. I just wanted to know how I got here in this color, and before you open yours up and say, wait, mine doesn't look like that. That's why.
Brian, real quick, if you already had this program loaded up, is that right? This file?
Correct. I loaded up the file. Real quick, just to backtrack, I just opened the file, Command-O, or under the File menu, under New, or Open, I should say, not New, because New was like a recorder, and you'll want to record it. So you open, and then just choose your sound file. Accordingly, I chose one already. I've actually brought it over from Pro Tools, so that's how you open a file within RX. Like any other program, very simple. In fact, I could open another one, and it'll just draw it out, and there you see it. You have your universe up here, your modules on this left here, your spectral view, which down here you have a slider where you could toggle between the waveform and the spectral view, which is going to be very important. As you're learning to see the spectral view and what it's showing you, you could use this as kind of like a good resource as a reference to see, make sure you're looking at what you're looking at. Close that one real quick. Back to where I was here. Did I just close the wrong one? I totally just closed the wrong one.
I think you did.
That's okay, because I have these things called Open Recent. Of course, I don't know where my spots are anymore, but that's okay. I'll find new ones. So basically there. So I have the overlay here with the sound form. So real quick of what we're looking at for those who are not familiar. On this side here I have the color graph, which I could change the saturation of the colors. Darker red is louder. Violet is going to be the softer sounds you see. We have a frequency scale along the vertical axes here. We have a time scale along the bottom. So what I'm going to be able to do in this is actually literally go in within actually, you know what I'm going to do? Do things a little differently here, because I want to. There's my section that I was looking for. So so we have spectral repair. Now, for me, I just generally turn off the waveform. I don't need it anymore. I've been doing it a while. There's my pop that we were showing you before. So I have this audio. Now, for people who are new, generally this is a good reference when you're looking, so you can see where your sounds lie. Even there, I could see that pop pretty fairly easy here. Now, what I'm going to do with this pop is typically we would draw pops by selecting them. When I turn on this frequency scale, you could see that in the spectral repair, I'm not all the way up to it doesn't go all the way up to above, say, 3K here, which I could see on the scale on the side. So when I depop it, I'm going to literally just highlight the pop itself. By doing that, I'm going to use the rectangle tool here, which gives me a box, it's frequency and time dependent, but always a square. And this is the easiest tool to use, I find. So I'm going to highlight my pop, just around it. Now I'm going to choose the spectral repair module here, which is a spectral repair. Right away, you'll notice off the bat that I have the replace tab selected, and I have this box over here, which is pretty much the region it uses to redraw your waveform. Now to remove my pop, I'm going to keep it on replace, and I'm going to just basically hit process and see what happens. Now you'll see that there's a little bit of a hole there caused by that kind of interpolation. That's why I have these other options in terms of selections. I've got, I lost you, didn't I?
No, I'm here. I'm just absorbed in what you're doing.
Okay. So just making sure my camera light's not on. Wait, I'm not on my camera. That's why.
So real quick, Brian, to select that pop there, and I know, I'm sorry, this is from a very beginner's perspective, because I'm looking at this the first time. How did you select that? You just clicked in the region?
So basically, you see that little plus sign. Basically, as I draw it, it's going to give me the parameters of the box. So I'm just surrounding it.
And to get on that tool, you just selected that green tool.
Right here on the bottom is your toolbar. So these are all the different kinds of selection tools. We have a magic lasso, which will select things, and a paintbrush, which you could decrease and increase the size of, and a magic wand. That's the one that.
Sure. So this is just like Photoshop.
Just like Photoshop in its tool set. In fact, what you'll find is that doing this is a lot like Photoshop in the sense that when you tend to see things that look right, they are going to sound right.
Okay. Cool.
I tend to, and as a professional, I tend to use this simple tool most of the time because it's the easiest to use and it's the quickest to use. And generally, doing something like this is going to cause interpolation errors because it doesn't know what it's looking at. It's a little bit less in terms of frequency and time. It's got a lot more information there. So I'm going to stick to using this one tool here. And I also use this other tool, which keeps me. It selects all the frequencies, but it only gives me time dependency. Right. In this case, I'm going to just choose the one tool. And again, I'm going to highlight the pop. Now I'm pretty much going to the edge of it. Right. Practice is the key. When you're beginning this, you'll make mistakes, and the cool thing is you could undo. And there's a little history box down here, so you could actually skip undos if you want, and go back 3 or 4 steps if you've done a couple of things. But the key is practice makes perfect, and it takes a lot of practice to sort of get these things right. But just real quick, so I have this pop I've highlighted. I have the Replace tab selected. By default, you're on Attenuate, which is not like a typical attenuate in the audio world. It basically redraws the waveform based on the surrounding information, but in adjusting the level accordingly to what we sees around it. So I'm going to try to process that and see what happens. So you can see that I was left with, it lowered the volume of the pop here, but it's still there. And you can still kind of hear it a little bit. So in this case, the attenuation is not going to be the best case scenario. Now, Replace is just another tool to do it. And what that does is literally using the surrounding region here and here, it actually literally redraws this section. So if I hit process on that, you'll see that it's removed the pop, but it doesn't, again, like Photoshop, it doesn't look quite right. Let's see what this sounds like. So if you could hear that, there's a little bit of a dip in audio, and I could see it because it's a little blacker here. I could see that little bit of a problem I caused. Now, so I'm going to undo that. Now, for me, professionally, what I've learned, and this is, again, practice, as you're beginning, practice with this stuff because it's really important. Pattern tends to work in this situation. What pattern does is it tends to look at things as sort of an aggregate so that you can see that there's no loud information around this pop, at least not in my processing region. So it's going to average it out pretty well to look like what's around it. Whereas to the left here, you can see that if I were selecting something close to here, there's a lot of loud information in the left and not so much in the right, which may cause me problems with this. So pattern, it's literally like a pattern to me. I look at it and I want to try and match this area around it. So let's see what that looks like. Much better. You can see. And pretty seamless. Now you can see here how there's no residual pop left over. It didn't cause me issues. Everything looks fairly natural and even. And so,
Brian, did you even make any adjustments, or did you just use the preset?
Well, I didn't make any adjustments at all. Typically with a pattern, I shorten the surrounding region like this. So this bar allows me to tell it what it's going to choose.
Okay.
Typically, I'll shorten this all the way on the pattern because I don't want it to see as much as it needs to.
Right.
And I'm sure that this will work too. Yeah, you can see that that's probably going to work better. And I do that because the less information I have to augment, the better off you're going to be as a rule. You're less prone to causing issues. So I would typically, as a default, have this set like that. Now, just real quick to just come full circle, partials and noise works kind of like a replace and pattern in one. It's a longer process, but it will consider lesser volume, less loud things versus louder things. And when I process it, you're going to see it's going to take a little bit. It's actually on my other screen.
No.
But I'm going to move it over as soon as I can. If I could grab it fast enough, there we go. Here we go. If you're going to see it now. So it takes a little bit more. And you can see that even in that case, you can see the big dip that doesn't match at all. Now, I could interpolate this again and fix that dropout. I would use a pattern to fix it, which is what I said before. And, of course, I can eliminate that, and look how beautiful that is. Or I could just know, and again, for beginners, practice, 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 practice. And you'll learn that these kinds of things, I can just go to the pattern tab right away, remove it, and look how beautiful that looks.
Okay, so now let me back up real quick here. For the beginners, the way they practice would be to pull in a wave file, either straight from Pro Tools or just by opening up like you showed us at the beginning.
Correct.
And then maybe set it on waveform at first just so they can see what the heck they're looking at. When they identify a pop, then they can translate it to the spectrograph look, and at that point just use the what was the button that you clicked on there? And again, this is for beginners. Where was it that you clicked to open up where you can clean it up?
Okay, so here on the right here, the modules, we have all the modules. So this is the spectral repair module. You see it's highlighted in blue.
Okay, got it. So they should
that signifies that it's open. So I can open more than one at a time. And I typically, when I work, I'll have two open, usually the declick and the decrackle, and I'll just kind of hide them out of the way like that. just because I tend to switch these tabs and have these preset already, so I don't need to mess with them, but I'll need to switch these tabs. With this, I always have this on my particular setting, so it's just here in case I need to move the sensitivity up and down, which I'll get to in a moment, because this is the second most important module for anyone who's beginning. Is they're going to use a lot of. So we removed my pop here. So let's zoom out a little bit and find a little bit section. We'll play a little bit here. Let's go. Actually, I have to move back because I'm all the way at the end of my file here. Let's find a nice clean section here.
Okay.
So right there's a good spot. So I don't know if you're going to be able to hear some of these little ticks because of the nature of my sound. But there's a little bit of crackly stuff in here. So with the decrackle module, which is also the declick module.
Hey, real quick, Brian.
Yeah.
Real quick. I know you've been looking at the spectrograph for a long time, and you can see clicks, pops, and challenges. Can you circle with your mouse where you see the pop?
Sure. So I'm in this. I'm actually listening for the pops first and foremost, and I say that because a lot of people forget they need to listen when they're looking at something, even audio people. So I'm going to change the graph here so you can pull them out a little bit more. So, but here's a great example of a pop. Actually, oh, I'm wrong. That sounds like a sound effect. Looks like a pop. Here's one in here. I'm actually going to change my tools here so I can circle it here. I'll change to the brush, which gives me the little thing here, so that I could just circle it here. So it's in between here. Here's where my pop is. And I don't know if you can kind of see the vertical. There's a little bit of a vertical line here, very short duration. That's what a tip typically looks like. Now, this is pretty noisy, and that's what all that blue saturation is the noise. Now, if I'm in waveform, you're not going to see any of that noise, but you will see that tick right here. Let me go zoom in a little bit there, and that's this little slider right here. You could choose which one you're going to zoom in on, either the spectrogram or the waveform. And there's another slider here, which is the zoom in and the switch between the two.
Right.
So here you can see that here's that tick right there. Now, if I go to this, I'm going to put my cursor right on it so we know exactly where I'm at. And if I switch over to the spectrogram, you'll see where that tick is. Now you could barely see it. I'm going to move the mouse over a little bit because you can't see it, but you can see that little vertical line right there. That's what the tick looks like.
And through tons of practice, you're able to spot that, listen to it, and then see it right away.
So as a beginner, I would recommend either doing this or keeping the saturation kind of between, because then you can see what the waveform looks like in relationship to what that tick looks like. You'll notice that in the waveform, it's just across the waveform. But the reason I love the spectral repair window is that the tick never goes into low frequencies. Clearly, there's ambience going on in here, which is all this green stuff. There's some kind of noise. So it doesn't make sense that I'd want to mess with any of this stuff. So the tick is well above it. So I could just highlight the tick, and I could literally do a spectral repair like I did before on the pop on that tick with the pattern. Same as before, just because everything's equal. But with ticks, the last thing you need to do is literally remove every tick manually. It's very small. You can see that the time scale, you're talking less than 1/10 of a second, so very tiny but very audible. So with the declick module, which I have a declick tab, a decrackle tab, an interpolate tab, which the interpolate's very advanced. I'm not going to get into that now. The decrackle and declick are very important because now, to be clear, when we're talking about clicks, we're talking about what this is. This is a click, short duration, louder, generally higher frequency thing. Decrackle, a crackle is not that. Even though it sounds very crackly, a crackle, it generally has many more occurrences. It sounds a little bit more distorted and is more sputtery. I probably find a little bit of that somewhere in here as well. We'll get back to that. But for now, I'm going to use the declick module here. Now, I've got a couple of different settings for that. We have a single band, which is for mostly digital, kind of single band, meaning frequency response. So if this click were a huge thing, a digital click or something, I would use that. This takes out a lot of that stuff. For purposes like this old recording, which a lot of people will use old records, I'm going to use the random M band. M meaning multi-band, meaning it could be within a lot of different frequencies, and that kind of opens up the way it searches for these clicks to include not just a one band frequency, but they could be like this one's here that we were looking at before is between 1K and 4K. This one over here that I could barely see, which I'm sure that no one else can see, is a little bit higher than that. It's about 6K. So the multiband is going to allow all that to get eliminated. Next to that, I have the click type. Click, thump, discontinuity.
Uh-huh.
Tongue twister. So discontinuity is also a digital error. You don't run into that a lot. I wouldn't worry about it right now. Again, experimenting will tell you how to deal with these things.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep it on declick for now for the beginners. Sensitivity is how hard you want it to hit. Generally, for light things, I keep it around 5. 5 to 6 is a nice little thing to allow for dialogue. Music is much more forgiving, by the way. Features, motion picture, TV tend to be much more dynamic, and where there's dialogue that's much louder than music, you need to be able to adjust for those. So when I'm doing fixes, I'll scoot this way up to probably about 8 or 9, which is pretty heavy-handed. The skew frequency is also is part of the advanced version, which we're in, which is not part of the regular RX. So for beginners, we're going to leave that out because you're probably going to get the regular version, and not really see these two things down here.
And is that titled? I know it's not a regular version, but is it like RX4? Is there a version number?
Yeah, it's RX. This is RX4 Advanced, and then there's RX4. There's RX4 and RX4 Advanced.
Got it.
So I set up my declick now. Now, the cool thing about using this window is that, again, now if I'm on the waveform, I could just as easily highlight it, hit my process, and it's going to declick all this area. You'll see it change. You see all those clicks get removed.
Wow. Yeah.
But remember, that thing in there was an effect, so I removed something I didn't want to remove. Let's go back and I'll play it for you. That's a footstep, or they're hitting something, but when I declick globally, that's what I get.
Right.
Not desirable. Again, why it's important to understand this view, because then I could see that there's that one thing we didn't want to remove. So now I could, let's go all the way to the spectral view. I could choose around that region. You'll notice that I'm not going lower than I need to, or higher than when there's nothing there, but just where there's that one click I showed you, but there's a few other little ones in there, and then I could process that. So
that's probably a big tip right there for a beginner, is that you're not going to be working on the full spectral. If it's a click or something, it's going to be in the higher end of the spectrum, and you're not even bothering with the lower end because obviously it's a click. That's not going to
That's
be
correct.
on the lower registry.
And this is it's a very important point you make, which is one of the things that makes spectral repair so amazing is that we can do that. So let's just move on to this next piece right here.
Up to my office.
Now, right there is another great example of sibilance. And this is also something for the advanced users, which I'll get into in a moment. Now, in this piece that's really kind of sibilant,
Up to my office.
you can see there's a lot of low-end information that's really bright. And part of that shh sound is them literally is being on the microphone. And you can see the saturation down below. So rather than mess with this entire word, which is here, I can literally go below it, and let's do a spectral repair there. Here, in this case, because of the fact that I'm not in a pattern, there's multi-stuff around it that's fairly loud, I'm going to go back to replace and replace that with something, with what it redraws.
Up to my office.
And you could hear it's a little bit less thumpy. Hopefully you could hear that. It's a little bit. Now,
Up to my office.
that's why it's important.
Up to my office.
Also in here, you could hear a lot of pops.
Up to my.
You hear all that kind of scratchiness in there?
Yeah.
Hard to see. Again, with waveform view, you could see it here. That's what we're listening to. All those scratches, right? Now, when I go back to my spectral view, I can see them here. Now, I can interpolate some of them. I can decrackle. But the cool thing about the declick is that, again, I could avoid that area. I'm just going to choose it. I'm not going to go too low in frequency, just the area where I hear it, and see how that works. And you can see how some of those ticks were removed.
Right.
To my office. To my office.
And I never affected that low-end material, which is part of the man's voice.
Right.
And there's some other low-end garbage here, which is something that I would get rid of with EQ, just because there's actually a lot of it all the way throughout. But we can interpolate that if we want to. Now, for advanced users, this is kind of cool because this is the sibilance that we used to not be able to do anything about.
To my office.
That S where he's saying office. It is
Mhm.
very loud. It's very obnoxious, and what it is oversaturation on an analog source, which is not something we've been able to remove easily. So I'm going to zoom in. I've highlighted a section in this little box, square box with a magnifying glass. Will zoom to get my selection, and you can see there's the cheat notes right below it. So if you're ever confused as what they do, read the manual, look at these notes, familiarize with everything. Everyone should do that. So here I have this S. Well, I know that a lot of that loudness comes from that sibilant. So I don't want to remove this whole S because let's see what happens. You can see
In my office. In my office.
it gets a little bit tinny because I've removed the entire body of the sound. But what I can do is use this cool gain reduction module, which I'm going to, in 2 dB increments, I'm going to process that down to just reduce the level of it. I'm also going to take this sibilance here, this dark red in here. I'm going to zoom way in because I don't want to affect it too much, and kind of gain reduce. Now I'm in very specific time, 0.2 of a second at 4.1 K or so, right? So very specific, and I'm going to gain reduce that down a bit so we're not so red. I'm hitting it probably 12 dB. I'm just hitting gain over and over again to reduce it. And that's what we're seeing go by. It goes by rather fast, and you'll see that here in my history thing here down in the bottom corner. That's what I've done. You see how many times I've pushed gain. Now I could bring up this gain level to reduce 8, but I don't want to go too far because obviously we're trying to preserve the sound. So I'm going to zoom out now and see what I've done.
In my office.
So you can hear how less intrusive that S is compared to what we had before. Here's what I did.
My office.
Let's go all the way back to the beginning. I pushed gain a lot of times, so here we go.
My office. In my office.
So it's a lot less explosive than it used to be. So now instead of having to compress that sound away,
in my office.
I can literally gain reduce the offending frequencies and reduce sibilance, which is a brand new thing that we've never been able to do before. Time consuming, yes. Easy to do, no. But possible.
But possible.
And it's important because if you're on a mix stage for advanced users and you have that kind of thing, if you have an instance of it, you could fix it in seconds. You don't have to sit there and mess with it too much or try and put a dip in it when you're in Pro Tools where you're literally dipping out the entire waveform. Now we're just getting in within frequency, and it's much more effective. So let's go back to beginners for a second because I have this whole section here where I want to show some more. Now here we've got some crackle in here.
In my office.
I'm just moving my screen a little bit here. Hold on, let me move back here a little bit.
I need to talk to you.
So there's a good
talk to you.
Good tick in there. I don't know if you could hear it.
To talk to you.
To
talk to you.
In this case, we can't really see the tick in this waveform. It's in here somewhere. But this is another reason why getting used to using this view is very cool because I could adjust what I'm seeing here to saturate the colors a little bit better and find that tick, which if I zoom in, now suddenly you can see it much better. There's this vertical line in here. Again, this is hard to see for people who aren't used to it. Let's see if we can see this on our waveform. You can't even see it there.
Yeah.
So when you're hearing ticks within dialogue, getting out of the waveform view and getting used to this is crucial. And you can see the tick. It starts all the way up here and it comes all the way down here. Now, for this, the nature of this tick is I could also decrackle this too. So I'm going to choose this area, do my declick here. I keep saying decrackle. I mean declick. I apologize for any confusion. Oops, that was the wrong one. So I declicked it. No, it didn't take it away. I'm going to highlight it, use my spectral repair. Now in this case for spectral repair, unlike before where I was using pattern, you can see there's a lot of loud stuff around it. So I'm not going to use the pattern here. I'm going to stretch it all the way down, and I'm going to use the replace. But you'll notice we put a hole in there.
Yeah.
Our pop is gone, but we put a hole in there. And here's one of the keys, one of the big tricks for beginners and advanced people to doing spectral repair. it's not as easy as just doing one fell swoop a lot of the time. So what I'll do in this case, typically I'll cut the pop in half. Where I have the body of the sound here amongst this dialogue, I'm going to do a replace, because
Up to you.
that dropout with all that ambience, you can see it's a little bit bare, but you're not going to hear that.
Up to
Right.
you.
I still have a little bit of that high-end tick, and on the top end, I'm going to actually use pattern. I'm going to lower the surrounding region to minimal, so I don't want to pick any of this stuff up. I'm going to use pattern here, and you'll see that there's a nice blend here.
Up to you.
And that's one of the biggest keys to doing spectral repair, is that not everything is easy, and I say that meaning that pops don't all come out in one shot. So sometimes it takes two tries to get out one pop, but the results
Up to you.
are pretty spectacular, as you can see.
Yeah.
And that's important for everybody, because a lot of people think that these tools should be quick and easy and make it so you don't have to use your brain to do them. Which
Right.
is true. I mean, to some extent, I can highlight this whole thing, I can decrackle the whole thing, I can find settings that are nice and global, but ultimately, the goal is to do it right and do it well, and you want tools that are going to be effective. There's another good example of a low-end anomaly that we want to remove. Here we have, oops, don't want to see that. So there's a little bit of a thump in here on the lower end. Again, with low-end frequency stuff, typically, or here you go, you can see that in there. You can see the waveform kind of spread out here, which is indicative of a large, long, low-frequency wave. So if I zoom in here, you can see that what that translates into is that low-end redness that we have in here. And at the bottom, you can see that. I'm moving on my modules so I can see if I'm at 0. Here's literally, I'm not even at 0 yet. Let me zoom out a little bit more here. Minus, here we go. Grab. So now we're still not at 0. Hold on a second. Sorry, I do admit some of the zoom tools are a little bit clumsy, I think, and I hope that that's one of the things that they tend to work on a little more. Okay.
That's still amazing to be able to pull that out like that.
Yeah, so there's that thump. You can see it there pretty clearly with the blue. That's saturated with green, and I can make it red. But there's that thump. So if I put my cursor there, let's review that waveform again. Again, you can see the low frequency information there. Let me make that bigger. So the low frequency wave, you can see that discrepancy right there. That's exactly what we're looking at. So that's this waveform. So again, now a declick isn't going to work here on a low frequency thing, but without messing with that noise up here, which is part of the track, there's some effects going on. I could interpolate by using my spectral repair. For this, again, lower frequency in the middle of stuff, I'm going to go back to replace and hit process. And oops, got to stop doing that. And now it's gone.
Wow.
And so let's put my mouse there so we know where we are. I'm going to go back to that waveform view, because you'll notice the discrepancy changes right there.
Right.
So that's before and that's after.
Wow.
So you could really see it in the waveform views, and you can see it here, obviously. So it's really useful, and it's like it's a great demonstration, and I could pull out more clicks all day long to show. There's a nice little one.
Sure.
Bumps all day long. You can see how big that one is, and again, this is all the way across the board. Now I could go to keep all the frequencies still, interpolate that with the replace, and what do I get? Big holes on top.
Right.
Which is not desirable. So what I'll typically do is, again, split it into two. And you can almost see a little delineation here between the two versions. So I'm going to do the low portion on replace, which is okay. I see a little bit of weirdness there. And then I'm going to do the high portion on pattern. Beautiful.
Wow.
And then this little spot here, I could always use pattern here just to fill in the gaps. That's going to be even better. So 3 or 4 interpolations sometimes are necessary to get out a pop, but it's kind of what you need to do. and it's not just as easy as just like one thing or choosing the magic, the paintbrush or the lasso and just going like this and choosing your thing, because that, believe it or not, when I go to replace that, that's still looking at all this area around it either
Sure.
way. So these kinds of tools will take up a lot of your time, and you shouldn't be wasting your time using them. If you're a beginner, stick with the rectangle, stick with the time tool, and you'll find better results, faster results. By the way, this one's the same too. This one keeps the frequency dependent, but over across the entire time thing. So if I have a high frequency hum, I could do this and literally remove it or gain it down.
Right.
It's pretty awesome. So stick with these particular tools. Learn quick keys, very important. Use your graph here to go back and forth so you can see what you're doing. Learn the spectrogram. Learn how to use it, because it's going to save you a lot of time, and just practice.
So it sounds like in order to practice, the best way to do it again is to take that waveform. Let me back up real quick. That screen we're looking at here, this is an actual project, the Pro Tools.
Yes.
That's an actual project. So for someone who is working on a project just like that, and this will probably be time for another tutorial, a subsequent tutorial, but they could literally take a waveform that has a pop, a crackle, some kind of garbage sound. They can import that into, and I know you showed me before how to import that one specific right from Pro Tools into RX4. Could you show me that again real quick?
Absolutely. In fact, this pop right here is that same first pop that I took out.
Okay.
That's that pop right there.
Okay. Cool.
I know that because I chose it specifically.
Right.
So now RX4, both versions, both the RX4 and the RX4 Advanced, has this Connect module. It's replaced the Spectral Repair plugin.
Now, did you just open that, or?
I had it open, but basically it would be in my audio suite menu. It's an audio suite, so I would have to highlight my region, like you would do anything in Pro Tools, and then it would come in my Izotope menu. It would be under Connect, or here under Other, or Sound Reduction, Noise Reduction is what it's considered, and it would be under RX Connect 4. So that's what that is. So basically, I've highlighted my region. I want to take that pop out. So now I hit send to go to my RX, and you'll see my RX. I'm going to hit no there because I don't want to save what's before it, and it already pops up in RX. So there's that pop.
Okay, got it. So for someone to practice, like you said, they could, if they're in a Pro Tools session, or if they're in a Pro Tools session, they could open up that file just like you've done here, or if they already have a WAV file that they know is problematic, they could just open it up direct into RX4, and then just identify it using the waveform, identify where's that pop or that crackle, and then use the process that you just showed us to get rid of that pop or crackle. And I would expect also over time their ears will develop as they do this as well. So part of the practicing is being able to listen for where those problematic areas are, and then do what you just showed us here, throughout a whole piece, and eventually you'll get good. So the tools what you showed us today are excellent for beginners to develop more advanced levels, and at the same time it looks like you've shown us some advanced steps for pro users who are tackling a problem or want to kind of speed up their workflow as is.
Well, yeah, and you brought up a good point. One of the things I haven't mentioned is ear training, and I've been doing this for a long time. And when I started doing analog film straight to tape through big machines that I would have to process. So it was all about listening, and I can't emphasize that more, because now that we have these visual tools to sort of show us these things and to see these things, unfortunately, it also means that people get a little bit lazy about listening.
Right.
And you could when I showed you, you could see that the waveforms got better. You could visually see that it was repaired, and it looks great. But if you hear it, it's not great. So remember, we're all about sound. So if it sounds good, it's good. So yeah, all this is about listening. In fact, typically what you don't see, I'm going to go back to my screen, my screenshot for a second here. What you don't see me doing My workflow is right now I'm toggling between the two things. This program's on one screen,
Right.
two monitors here. So I actually normally have one in one and one in the other monitor. So I'm seeing them both at the same time, which
Right.
also allows me to not have that waveform view up in RX.
Right.
Because I don't need this if I'm seeing it in Pro Tools already.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? So it's there. For me, I use it like that. Now,
Right,
for a
right,
beginner, if you're beginning, I would recommend opening RX, opening a file, learning RX by itself, independent of Pro Tools.
Okay.
Because when you're in Pro Tools, this is all fun, and you'll learn the integration of it, but you're not going to learn RX by being in Pro Tools, bottom line.
Right, okay.
And so what I would encourage new people to do, new beginners to do, now you could do it this way too, using the RX. Excuse me for a second. You could use the RX standalone, but you could also, like I'm showing you in Pro Tools here, which I did before for my example, is just if you have a thing in Pro Tools, you could choose a fairly large, sizable portion of audio like this, and then send it. It's just going to take a while for it to render out, but you can see it shows up. And once I'm here, you don't ever have to go back to Pro Tools. This is exactly the same thing as opening RX and opening a sound file in RX by itself. So it's virtually the same thing.
Where was that send that you hit?
Oh, so it's on the RX Connect. There's Pro Tools. Pro Tools? There you go. So it's right here on the bottom of the RX Connect module here.
Oh, okay. So you open it up. You basically open it up as you did before, and then you hit. Show me where the send thing is.
Okay, so I'll do it again. Let me choose a different section here. So we'll choose a section here, and then I'm going to hit send here.
Oh, down. Okay, bottom left. Yeah, it's a little bit small on the screen. So okay, I see.
Okay, so it's all part of this RX Connect plugin. I don't think I can actually make this bigger, and my zoom in.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I probably just need to get glasses.
No, I actually have my screen resolution. It's kind of small because it fits more stuff on the screen, which is important. Incidentally, I wear glasses, so maybe that's why. So this is the send button. So once I hit that, it opens it up in RX, and you'll see it pop on top and open up the waveform, and there it is. Okay. So now within here, I could do all my practicing. I could still zoom to wave. And again, this is the coolest thing about RX. This is new to RX4. It's one of those features that is long time coming. People have been asking for it, including myself, to be able to use the program simultaneously. So now when you're learning, you could pretty much have both open, practice, go back and forth. But I would say that if you want to really learn the spectral review, stay in this for a while. Really get to know what it looks like. Go back and forth saying, okay, well, this is what this kind of sound looks like in a waveform. What does that look like if I look at the spectral view? Incidentally, on the section I see, you can see a lot of these long stretches of sound. Again, that's single frequency stuff. That's probably like a sine wave synthesizer, if I had to guess. Yep.
Huh.
And I know that because there's a good pop in there, too. And you can see all that right there. Let me go to the waveform just for fun. You can see all those pops there. So you can see all that's the pops there.
Right.
I'm going to go to the spectral review again, and you can see them.
Sure.
So again, anything long-term in time, like this thing, you can see that it's within a certain frequencies. I'm going to listen to and make sure it's not a hum. And of course, the short duration stuff like this stuff all pops. Now, just for another example, because this is kind of a good example to show. Another example of when I would do two different repairs for each pop. Now, the other cool thing, which I didn't get into, which is important for advanced users if they don't know this, but you could multi-select things. So I'm going to actually do the high-end parts of these pops first because I don't want to. This kind of synthesizer, just for everyone's knowledge, is really hard to interpolate. If I interpolate above this, it'll cause errors. Or drop. You can see it dropped out the synth right there.
Right.
And it's just the more singular the kind of sound it is, the more closer to a sine wave, the less likely interpolation is going to work and be nice. So I want to keep all this information. So I'm going to do a couple of different things. I'm going to do replaces on the lower ends, and if I hold down Shift, you'll see a little plus sign come up next to my cursor, and I could do multi-regions and select multiple regions. You see how I have 3 regions,
Yeah.
3 pops selected, and then I can interpolate them at the same time, which had okay results. I don't know if it was in this last I did. It was kind of wonky, but I could always undo and bring it down, and then I'm still choosing my regions. Conversely, if I want to deselect a region, I could hold down Option, and it gives me the minus next to it, and I could just unselect it.
Right.
It's like that. Okay. So that's a good way to get out multiple pops. So let me remove some of these pops here. So I've got the low end pop removed. So I have all these high end things. So I'm going to go back to pattern, and I'm going to choose, though I think the declipper might work on some of these things. I'm going to hold down Shift and choose the multiple pops here. And you'll notice I'm doing it fairly fast. I don't find a reason to be super precise. Another good tip is don't get too caught up in the minutia of like, oh my God, there's a little bit of spill over here. There's a little bit. It doesn't work that way. It actually is smarter than that. And if you're doing it, if it's going to work, it's going to work. And unless I'm not covering up half of it like that, I don't need to worry about a little bit of overhang. It's smart enough to know that I'm trying to get the whole thing out. So there, I did my replace, my pattern interpolation. Pretty good. I still hear a bunch of low-end stuff and crackles. So as a rule for the decrackle, now this time I'm going to go into the low end because I want it to affect it.
Right.
Pull up my declick module. Let's see, do a process there. You saw. So that's much better than this original one. Let's go back to the beginning. Here's the original. And here's after all the fixes. So there's a little bit of wobbliness in the music here. Again, another good thing that it's good for is I go back to replace, and I could choose that little drop out there and hit replace, and it'll sometimes, in this case, it's not a good, I can see there's a lot of breakup, so it's not going to be very good.
Right.
But also redraw the sound that's missing. So that's a little smoother still. No, that's a nasty pump. Let's get this one out too. So that one was ugly all across the board, but I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to do a pattern over it to fill in this space and to get rid of the top part. So again, as you get better, you start learning how to use things. So I could do 2 things at once. I may decide to do 2 things differently, but that's stuff you learn with practice,
Right.
training, and really getting to know what you're looking at.
Right. So somebody could easily just take this tutorial, watch from the beginning to the end, and that would give them enough homework to get good over time, to develop the ear and the eye for what you're doing.
I think so, and you know, I tell this to even colleagues of mine who are professionals, who are new to spectral repair, and they ask me these things. You know, I'm happy to give them hints on how to use certain tools on particular sounds, and maybe in a future tutorial I can go more in depth into like what kinds of sounds, what kind of processing works better for certain kinds of sounds. But ultimately, the more you practice, the better you are at really establishing what works best for your own workflow and what works best in terms of removing these sounds. You can see I wear glasses now. And you know, like you said, the ear training, the visual training, and practice are crucial. And it can be very frustrating, but you really literally need to sit there. You find yourself a nice, nasty recording, and I'm not talking. Don't bring in like music that's new where it's really compressed and you're going to get a super saturated waveform. That's not going to be useful. If you need to record something or find an old record, go online, go on YouTube, download something that sounds bad, but make it very bad. Make it like I just played for you on that example where there's very noticeable pops. Make it easy for yourself so that you could see what you're doing, hear what you're doing, and get good results, so you're not discouraged by the fact that you're looking at something and you're going, I can't even see anything in this.
Right.
That's because you've chosen the wrong thing to practice on, basically.
Interesting. Well, Brian, is there any way for people to reach out to you, a website you want to promote, or
I'm actually in the process of doing a website. Believe it or not, I haven't done that. Let me see if I can put my. I'm happy to have
people follow you on Twitter or.
I choose not to do Twitter, and I choose not to do it for a reason because my brain can't work that fast.
Okay.
But I do have a LinkedIn page.
Okay, perfect.
You can find me easily on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn slash my name. You can see it on my lower third here, Brian
Right.
San Marco, all one word usually. Or you can just look me up. There's no one else with the name San Marco as far as I know, except for my brother, who is not an audio guy. He's a
Okay.
chef, so you'll know the difference. And so, yeah, if you can find me on LinkedIn, you can email me at briansanmarco@gmail.com. Which is another great way. I'm happy to get emails. I love helping people. I'm doing this because I've been using Izotope a long time. I work with them. They don't pay me to do this. No one, Nolan hasn't paid me just for the audience. Not to you, Nolan. You're sitting right there listening.
Yep.
And so I do this because I like to help people. I've run internships. I've developed training programs also, which wasn't in my bio, but I've done all that stuff. So I'm happy to help. If anyone has questions, feel free to email me. Again, briansanmarco@gmail.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, which might be the better way to go because I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I try and stay active there because there is always a lot of people who are interested in coming up. I'm happy to help if I can. So look me up, drop me a line, and if I can help, let's chat, and I'll help if I can. And in the meantime, keep an eye out for videos because my goal, this is some of my first, Nolan's introduced me to this great technology, and I'm inclined to do many more in the future, so hopefully we can get a lot of people on board with this, but not so many as to steal the work from me because we don't want to put me in the poorhouse.
Yeah, well, Brian, thanks again so much for being on the show here. It's definitely a pleasure for me, and really fascinating watching a master, really work at what you're doing. So, would love to invite you back in for subsequent tutorials or reviews, or just some kind of tech talk stuff that we're going to be focusing on the website. So, would love to have you back, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. Well, we'll sign off, and the audience, check out PostProduction.com. We will be posting this up in the tutorial section, as we also did post one up in the gear review section, and you can always follow us on Twitter at PostProductionC. Find us on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're all over the place. So
exactly.
Look forward to seeing you guys on the next show.
Excellent. Bye.